This lesson concerns, again, a persistent attribution to God as the author of sin. It seems that one approach has been taken that seems prevalent. That is, people persist in saying, unless there's an argument to show that God's not the author of sin, since he must have purpose for evil and sin, then he must be the author of it. Well, in correlation and causation, that would really be the determinant, since the Old Testament, the biblical Hebrew specifically, teaches that man is causal. We are causal beings, we are causal agents, therefore we have actions that we deliberately cause ourselves to do or not to do. We have text all throughout the Old Testament that bear that out. We even have the indication of a purpose or instrumentality of signs. For example, even Moses of the Old Testament was told by God to cast down the rod he was carrying, and it became a serpent. And God told him that that would be a sign that would cause the people to believe that he sent him, because Moses in Exodus 4 was quite concerned how he would convince the people. So there was a deliberate intention of God to provide a sign, an indicator that Moses could use, and it would be causally influential, if you will, for them to cause themselves to believe. So we now have in the New Testament, John 20:31, the purpose for the signs, many other things that Jesus do. These particular signs and their contextualized narratives have been written perfect tense and remain on record in order that you might deliberately cause yourself to believe. That's that punctular action, simple form of action. And as one who is believing, that's a participle generative noun, which is what you become once you believe, because we're fathered through the gospel. Once we're fathered through the gospel, we're always being fathered through the gospel. Then we are one who is always believing, a believer, a generative noun. So a little bit of grammar, because this is an apologetic and outreach ministry that's based upon language. But when we talk about causation and correlation, we can show very quickly here. Let's just make ourselves a little graph here. For example, when you study statistics, we all know something about statistics. We're exposed to data every day. We take polling results during this grand election campaign that's going on right now. So let's just say crime rates, and what causes crime rates to increase. Well, let's identify correlations first before we do any causal assignment. So let's just say that we noticed when ice cream sales increase, so also does crime. So we'll say ice cream sales. And then we'd say second, when temperature rises. So temperature rises, so we'll say elevated temperature, it rises, so also does crime rates. And then 3, of course, we can say 1, 2, 3, ice cream sales, temperature, and then we can say outdoor activity. So as outdoor activities increase, we can now see, so the crime rates. So the question would be, is to which of these would you attach causation? So which would you attach causation? Well, you would say, well, none of these, but these are correlated. So for example, if you were reading the data and you were a law enforcement officer and you noticed people beginning to buy more ice cream, you began to, let's say, arrest them for purchasing ice cream. And then you would have to explain to the law enforcement officer after he says, well, every time ice cream sales rise, so does crime. So I'm thinking and supposing and assuming a questionable cause logical fallacy, that if I can discourage and reduce ice cream sales, then perhaps there won't be as much crime. And we would say, well, that's silly. And we would say, well, as the temperature rises, let's force people to remain indoors as they typically do when it's very cold or it's inclement weather outside. And then people would say, well, that won't reduce That's not the cause. Now, it would reduce crime if you thought about it. You could retain people, as we've been shut down in several areas in the United States, and people all over the world are dealing with a global pandemic. There are a lot of things that aren't taking place except during civil unrest, rioting, and violence. Crime, ironically, has escalated in spite of it. And then outdoor activities, as they increase. So you tell people you may not go to the parks, you may not go out and ride on the streets or walk on the sidewalks or whatever other people and things we do outdoors. So you try to tamp it all down and you say, well, that would be silly. Well, then to none of these would we attach causation. So in the Bible, for example, we have the word hagios, means holy, set apart, to separate. God separated a people unto himself, a peculiar people, and he would be the formative power in their lives. He would even teach them how to live, what to give them their vocabulary, the words to speak, their diet. You can read all about that all throughout the Bible. But so we have God as holy, holy, holy in the Bible. Very profound assertion there. So for those who, let's say, have attached, let's say, the omnific Godhead, just to save time here, the all-powerful, all-knowing, everywhere present, all omni-holy as well, Godhead, those who've attached, let's say, crime, crime rates, let's just say any kind of crime, which sin is a crime in the Bible, it's a breaking the law. So we have sin, to attach causation to the holy, 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 righteous God, any type. So we have 613 law codes in the Old Testament. So how would we attach causation to the omnific Godhead, the omni, holy, holy, holy God? Well, we can't. The Bible doesn't do that. So in reality, the word holy here in function, we could say is a detached correlation. And this is why when someone says, well, God's foreknowledge, and because God knows, then he can be assigned causation, but that's, again, it's a questionable cause, logical fallacy. Now that might have seemed simple, it's just that it's hard and difficult sometimes when we hear philosophy and we hear people finite, fallen as we are, and we try to construct a reality that requires very little appreciation for the Godhead. It's similar to the Trinity. The Trinity is more often forgotten. Well, so is the nature of the Godhead, the holy, holy, holiness of the Godhead. So often is the proper theodicy developed from the Scriptures, often simply lost in the conversation. So that it becomes very exasperating. People could just make extreme statements, say, well, God's the author of sin unless someone can prove otherwise. So that's even a fallacious argument strategy that transfers a burden of proof onto someone else. It'd be like, for example, a Christian, a believer, to suggest that, well, no one can disprove God, so therefore he must be. That really wouldn't be a rationale that would hold any test of validity and argumentation. It certainly would not be a strong argument, and it would perhaps contradict so many or demonstrate so many fallacies that it would not warrant the attention of someone who would just simply say, well, I'm a believer and you can't disprove God's existence. That would probably someone who really didn't hold much interest themselves in their own faith and their own understanding of the existence of God. A person like that probably wouldn't be very familiar with ontology, cosmology. They wouldn't know about teleology. They wouldn't be interested in the origins of the fields of science, calculus, physics, chemistry, all being produced and products of theology and are theological. And they certainly wouldn't know that the branches from that, such as pharmacology and technology. So a person without a substantial interest in their own belief simply makes empty assertions. So this ought to help if you can notice here that when you study the Bible, preach the Bible, you teach it, you also notice the character of the Godhead. The holiness of God is that which detaches any causal correlation. There we go. So there is no causation. So you say, well, but these things are correlated. Okay, but these things are unable to be attached. We can't attach this. They aren't attached. God's no more attached to an individual who sins than the sale of ice cream is attached to someone's personal crimes. So, you have a blessed day. I hope this helps, but it's called a questionable cause logical fallacy. And then if you don't study statistics, we all are aware of them. You can take a little time to research the difference between correlation and causation, and notice there is an assumption by people that correlation implies causation, and that's also incorrect. And it's just not critical thinking. It can lead you to make assertions against the holy, holy God that are not that to which he's subject. And it certainly would not reflect any understanding of the reality of the Godhead and his omnific traits, as though somehow God must be the author of this for it to be. Well, he's the one who assigned causation to man. So whether men like it, quote, or not, God created us causal beings, and we have acted according to our own causation. The Bible says that Jesus, the one in whom the fullness of the Godhead dwelt bodily, said of the Capernaunites, to Capernaum that is, that had the powers he worked and demonstrated in their presence been done in the presence of Sodom, he said the Sodomites, the city of Sodom, would still be here today. So he said and revealed in that Sodom could have repented, should have repented, and under the circumstance of his powers being demonstrated, would have. And yet that is a rebuke to the Capernaumites who are hearing that you all, with the ability, meaning you could, the obligation that you should, and now with the powers worked in your presence, you would not, but they would have. So that's not a riddle, that's the inbreaking, and apocalypto, if you will, where he unveils. It's an unconcealment, the word truth, where he negates any concealment. It's now gnosko, knowledge that he gave to them, and now they have oida, in our language, idea, and in Latin it's video, so they have insight. So they have absolute awareness through his revelation, through his unconcealment, through his conveyance of knowledge, and through his personally acquainting them with that, tying it all the way back, correlating them with Capernaum and Sodom, and then he gave them the information. So there is no question that the Capernaumites were now not any longer in a better position than Sodom. They're now in a worse position because they've had the powers worked. Now, what came from that rebuke, we don't know. We do know it was efficacious. We do know he had purpose in the rebuke, in the judgment, and he had purpose in revealing to us that he can reveal, apocalypto, the verb of apocalypse. He can unconceal, the verb of unconcealment, the word truth. He can convey knowledge, gnosko, the verb of gnosis. He then can inbreak with the insight, notice, oida, from idea in our language, video in Latin, oida in the Koine text. So he demonstrated that their causation, ability to cause themselves to repent, mind after what was indicated by those signs, by those powers, those works, just as John 20:31 says, these signs were particularly extracted from all the signs Jesus did, and they were here deliberately scripted and with the design and intended purpose in order that you all, the reader, the hearer of this gospel, might deliberately cause yourself to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that as one then who is a believer, one who is believing continuously always, you might have life through his name. So that's a good lesson. It's enough. It'll just help you because this might be silly, but it's very demonstrable and helps create a self-evident expression of the point being made in this lesson. So have a blessed day.